Ecological chaos gave birth to the highest mountain range on the European continent. The Alps offer an impressive landscape of peaks and ridges and fingers pointing towards the sky. No less than 70 summits reach heights of more than 4,000 meters, with 30 of them being in Mont Blanc itself. Since the dawn of time, the Alps were considered the water castles of Europe. But today, they are shaken by global warming. The glaciers are dying, and the water castle has begun to disappear. At present, the water is scarce and is becoming increasingly valuable. Situated in the heart of Europe, the Alps stretch over 8 countries. It is in France, in the area of Haute-Savoie, that you find the famous Chamonix Valley, situated at the foot of the snow-capped Mont Blanc. This history unravels more specifically in the village of Ouche, a resort famous for hosting World Cup ski events. The village is situated at 1,000 meters above sea level, and almost 3,000 people live here year-round. After a long night in February, the mountain slowly wakes up from its snowy sleep. Soon, the sunshine will heat the valley and wake the farms and chalets. It's at the foot of these mountains that Pascal Payot lives, the last goat farmer in the region. It's not yet 7 a.m., and Pascal starts the day the same as always. His goats seem to have escaped from Alphonse Daudet's famous book, Mr. Séguin's Goat. He shares an intimate moment before getting down to serious business.
Good morning, 1415. How are you today?
This year, more than ever, Pascal is attentive to the weather conditions.
There is one thing I look at closely, and it is the snow during the winter, because if we do not have snow when the spring comes and the weather gets warmer, the snow, when it melts, it turns into water, and it is at that point that vegetation normally grows. It turns out that over the past few years, the vegetation has had a hard time starting to grow due to lack of water. I've observed that often, and so it is important to have snow. This year I'm a little worried, because, well, on the northern slope there is still snow, but not the amount that there should be. On the southern slope, if there was no snowfall in March, we would start our spring in a drought. 1 centimeter of snow turns into 1 millimeter of water when it melts. What do we do without water?
After spending 20 years in the military, Pascal became a farmer. At 49 years of age, this late change of profession is the realization of a childhood dream.
It is a privileged moment, milking, because it is there that we see the state of the goat, see if nothing happens. If the teat is a little hot, the start of a little inflammation, the condition of their hair, their nails, and finally their hooves. It is because of this that I am dedicated to this profession, because we really do have the animals under our care, so it's important. What is interesting is that they all have a personality that makes the animal whole. It's a bit like a human. That is why I call them grunts.
Today, Pascal has 50 Saanen goats. Less wild than the traditional brown alpine goats, the Saanen are more docile. A characteristic that is important for Pascal as he works alone on the farm. The food of the goats is a crucial aspect for the herder, as it determines the quality of cheese. In winter, the goats eat hay as well as grains. In summer, they feed on the alpine greenery. Over the past few years, with the climatic changes, the making of the cheese has become very complicated. In winter, the feed has become more and more expensive, and in summer, the pastures are subjected to the climatic instability.
It's a human activity that has always existed in this area, and it could be doubtful if global warming or climatic change worsens. Perhaps at one point we will say, and now what do we do?
Pascal has a good reason to worry. They are well into February, and the snow has not yet fallen. It is a tragic situation since for the first time in a very long time, the Alps' lack of snow in the heart of winter means that the tourist season has been compromised. In the Chamonix Valley and all the European mountains, global warming is indeed a reality. With a 1.5-degree increase in temperature, it is 3 times higher than the world average. Jan Giesendanner is a climatologist. He works for Météo France as a weather forecaster for the Alpine area. He is also a weather forecaster for the large international expeditions on the mountain peak. Jan is a true ally for Pascal.
Hello, Jan.
Ah, hello.
How are you on this beautiful day?
The usual.
So, I have a question to ask you regarding next week's weather forecast.
Listen, it's simple. We've had a month and a half of relatively nice weather, and here it will change. There's a little bit of cold and snow. There really is a change, and after that, the following week, we find ourselves again with nice weather.
It has been 2 years that I have seen, for example, that by the 15th of September, there is no more water in the stream that feeds the source of the Blatière pasture. Is it directly linked, do you think, since 2003 at least, to the retreat of the glaciers? If this phenomenon continues, will we one day eventually have no more water on the pasture?
Yes, of course we're going to have concerns. We could have a drought. We could get to where conditions of life are difficult. There will never be a consistent climate. It's never consistent, but it's true that we must expect changes. What we would really like is to have snow all winter long to ski. That would be nice for the harvest, and it would be nice in the summer for the people to come to the mountain. We have an economic activity in Haute-Savoie that is closely linked to the weather, but it's an extremely fragile economy. It can work perfectly for a few years, and then it can decline very, very rapidly. But I strongly believe in human intelligence. Sometimes there are people who can invent things, and who can do things.
Yes, I think that the old proverbs no longer exist.
It has paid.
Yes, it has paid.
Agriculture is not the only sector that suffers from global warming and lack of water. It also affects tourism. The survival of the ski resorts depends on the winter visitors. And here arises a great paradox. In the period of peak tourism, the ski resorts multiply their water consumption by 10. Between the domestic usage and the production of artificial snow, the demand for water is sky high. Furthermore, in winter there is less water as the glaciers do not melt until spring.
So I had planned on bringing the snowshoes, but there is a lack of snow today, so we will not bring them. It will help us avoid having to lug them on the little road of snow that we will have. However, we will bring the sticks to be more stable in areas where there is a little bit of ice. Okay?
Like many of the mountaineers, Pascal has 2 jobs to make ends meet. He is also licensed to be a mountain guide. When he is not with his goats, he shares his passion of flora and fauna with the tourists.
Look over there on the small piece of snow. We are almost at the conditions for the beginning of April. What I mean is that the weather is warm enough to melt the snow, and there you can see the grass beginning to grow. Do you see that? And if this continues within a week, I bet you that small flowers will arrive to announce spring. But we are far from spring. So in February, to see this, it is absolutely not normal. If we get a deep freeze in the month of March, then the flowers will freeze, and it will endanger the production cycle. Okay, let's go.
How long have you been in the valley, Pascal?
I have always been here.
Were you born here?
I was born here. We are going to take the path to the right, but before we enter the forest, we will look at the view. The massive Mont Blanc. I have one thing to say about the glaciers. We can say that over the past 4 or 5 years, there has been an acceleration of the melting of the glaciers. I am from the valley. I live at the foot of the Bassin Glacier. Year after year, I see it recede at a high speed, and it causes a problem that if we don't do something in the future, and it continues at the same rate, what will happen to the water supply in the valley?
Especially in the large peak, right?
There, especially during the resort peak seasons. Especially since urbanization does not want to slow down.
But this melting, it is due to global warming, but also due to the lack of precipitation, right?
It is everything. When we see the conditions, the lack of snow, if it falls in March, we can maybe make up for the loss. But if it does not fall, we will start the spring with a drought. If we have a summer like in 2003, we will really have a drought. And so if in the fall, as it seems to come year after year, we must explain how to restore the groundwater.
Yes, but it's still a natural phenomenon. The melting of the glaciers?
I agree with you. But when we have the phenomenon combined with drought, let's say, and the lack of precipitation all year around, more retreating glaciers, melting of the snowfields, etc., there is, at one point or another, an impact on human activity. Look, some white! It is so nice to see some white.
Yes, the snow.
I've never seen that. In the middle of February, I have never seen this area with so little snow. We never walk on ice. We never have such low streams like this. It is covered with snow everywhere. And we don't have all this dry vegetation here. That's beau.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Shall we go?
Right side of Argentière?
Like always.
We will look at the glacier.
Okay.
Luc Moreau is a glaciologist, a researcher associated with the French National Center for Scientific Research. He has been studying the glaciers in the Alps over the past 20 years. Today, he is going up to the Argentière Glacier at 3,200 meters high. Jean-Franc, a friend and mountain guide, is going with him. The retreat of glaciers is the most spectacular manifestation of global warming in the mountains. Seen from the sky, it is hard to imagine it disappearing one day. Despite the melting, the mountains still show their teeth, and the crevices, their gigantic scars of ice, bear witness of the breath that animates them. Several years ago, Luc developed a system of photography that allows him to measure the evolution of the glaciers day by day. Each month he comes and collects more photos.
The glaciers in the mountain are one of the natural elements that react fastest to the climate, as it is made by the climate. It is made by snow that makes ice and then accumulates on the top. Therefore, if the climate is favorable, it can fatten, take the thickness, and also the speed. If the climate is not favorable, as at this moment, like in the past 20 years, it gets smaller and the mass gets smaller. The glacier slows.
Ah, there is the famous camera. Brilliant! How long has the camera been there for?
Almost 3 years.
And what do you do with it?
With this apparatus, I take photos every 2 hours, and what is really interesting is to look at the large rock that has melted about 10 to 12 years ago. And if we see the water appear on the rock, it means that we lost the catchments that are on the ice, in the rock. Therefore, it is a surveillance photo machine. It also takes images every day, so we can monitor the movement of the glacier, and we can see the dynamic of the falling crevasses. When they break away, there is a lessened amount of water that can feed the glacier. Therefore, it has less and less power. The glacier slides 30 centimeters per day. There is not much left. The glacier has changed a lot. If the glaciers shrink, then the rivers dry up. There are many problems in the world today regarding water supply. In the Andes, and a little everywhere, because the glaciers are diminishing and even sometimes disappearing. There is evidence everywhere in the world of the lack of water resources. Well, I will download the images. Only 1,722 photos remain. That is good. Okay, verification done.
The photos that Luc makes are edited to show the movement of the glaciers.
So there, always an image each day of the snow.
That is one per day?
Yes.
Oh, look at the piece that comes and falls. It's incredible.
And so when we do this fast,
they look like monsters, these glaciers.
We can see the shift of the ice to zero. It's from ice to nothing. That is extraordinary.
If there are any people who doubt the advancing of the glaciers, you now have the proof. You know, the crystal gatherers are the only ones to profit from global warming, from the melting glaciers. Because over the past 20 years, the glaciers melt 2 to 3 meters a year, which leaves the possibility of rocks that, in the past, have never been discovered.
As well as being a scientific researcher, Luc Moreau is a consultant to EDF Electricity of France, the world's largest utility company. Its mission is to find water sources subglacially, which is an unsuspected treasure to the production of electricity. For example, under the sea of ice, melted water has been exploited since 1970.
The production of electricity from the sea of ice, it represents what in the French hydraulic production?
Well, for the EDF, we say it is an average size. The installed capacity, therefore the energy that we can generate at any given moment, is 40 megawatts, and the production, it is almost the consumption of a town of 50,000 people.
Unlike the conventional hydroelectrical production, this underground power station directly uses the energy from the subglacial torrent. Water is turbined and transformed into electricity without being stocked in a dam.
You see, Luc, here we see the stream that comes directly from the sea of ice. It has a low flow in the winter, only 500 liters per second, but in the summer it multiplies by 40, up to 20 cubic meters per second. It is more of a flood, and it is from here that we capture the water and we send it towards the plant.
This catchment of subglacial water is situated at the lowest level of the sea of ice. Because of its position, Europe's largest glacier is known to melt spectacularly. Since 1830, it has lost 150 meters in thickness. After almost 40 years of being exploited, and with the retreating of the glaciers, the initial uptake of water has become obsolete.
So, this here is the historic caption of water which is under the rocks that we see here. It is an area that was uncovered at the time of construction, 40 years ago, by 130 meters of ice. It was blocked in 2009, and today it is a bit like the race against time to look for water higher under the glacier.
To search for higher water under the glacier is a big job. With the retreat of the front glacier, the sea of ice was buried by falling moraines. To maintain the activity of the turbines of the plant, a first intake was provisionally installed at 100 meters from there. The only solution for EDF was to find water at the furthest possible point under the glacier to sustain the exploitation of the subglacial stream.
It has taken a shape, huh?
It needed 2 years of intensive drilling, with tunnels kilometers long dug into the rock and ice, to trace the source and create a new uptake. A difficult and uncertain quest that ultimately proved successful.
Look here. After 2 years of looking, we have found our subglacial stream.
Great.
We only found this stream 15 days ago.
A lot of work. Great. Fantastic.
So what is the age of this ice loop?
It is 2 centuries old.
2 centuries?
Yes. It must have been snow at the time of the French Revolution at the foot of l'Aiguille du Midi. It took 200 years to get here, where after the glacier melts will give birth to the stream that you have captured.
How long will this source remain in service? How many years will it take for this glacier to lose its supplement? If one relies on the actual rhythm of the retreating of the glacier, the longevity is estimated at 20 years. Below, in the valley, Pascal is also a big consumer of water. For him, to use this resource intelligently has become a full-time job.
For me, what concerns my activities is the making of the cheese. I use a lot of water, so when we ultimately see the amount that leaves the network, one wonders a little bit. And when we are a little sensitive about this phenomenon, we try to conserve as best as we can.
Worried about the economy, Pascal consciously uses every bit of water. For example, after making the cheese, the water used to wash the tubs is used to wash the floor.
We are always concerned with the air quality, but I think we don't worry enough about the water quality or its quantity. That means that we should be aware that water will be rare in the future. It will be the white gold of the future. Also, at the same time, we should be thinking about how to change a little of our habits, how to prevent these periods of no snow in relation with the tourist activities, because otherwise, we will sink. I don't want to do what we always do, to be at the end of the rope and say, now what do we do?
Many of the specialists estimate today that global warming is directly linked to the emission of greenhouse gases. In the context of the valleys of the Alps, more than 80% of the carbon footprint is generated by transportation. In winter, during the peak season, tourist activities are partly responsible for the abundant gas emissions in the valley. But tourism is also the victim of the climatic change with the scarcity of snow. The carbon footprint is without a doubt Stéphane Lagarde's obsession. A former ski monitor, he has formed his own school, Eco Rider, the first sustainable ski school. Today, Stéphane's approach has become his main marketing statement to his clients.
So, eco-riders, today we take the train like always. It enters and is part of the process. And that is what we call the non-motorized traffic. It means that the train is the only means of transport that is the most ecological and the most neutral in terms of CO2. Also, above all, it allows us to see the scenery, avoid traffic, and have a good time together there. 3 years ago, I created EcoRider to put in action an environmental approach. The majority of the work was done 3 years ago, and it was the first to achieve a carbon footprint in my industry. I said to myself, Do something intelligent and constructive that is sustainable over time. That is what's important. That's it for today. Let's go. Let's get on the track. I've lived here since I was a kid. Now we see less and less snow that the winters are becoming shorter. You can see on the south side that there's already very little snow. We're only in February and it's really hot. Even us, over 20 years we see. We're well aware of what it will be like in 50 years. And so at this moment, you really must do something. Because in a world of words, we need people to do something. It's not enough to just cruise by. We must do.
Stéphane's commitment does not end there. Continuing on his environmental approach, he wears ski clothes made from recycled materials. He uses 100% vegetable wax and offers his clients picnics made exclusively from local products.
All right, girls, skis off. We're going. We're going to start our eco-picnic with some fine wine from Savoie. After, we'll follow it up with a soup and organic products. Then, we have some goat cheese that comes from Monsieur Pascal Payot, one of the last farms in the Chamonix Valley. Then, we'll have some raw ham from Savoie.
So it's good for the environment and the economy.
Exactly. Some cheese Olivier? There.
It is good, isn't it? It is such a feast.
Is it nice anyhow?
Simply delicious.
During the season, Pascal organizes a snack at a farm for the tourists. After his classes, Stéphane brings his clients to the farm. They have common concerns, so they have a lot to talk about.
Have a seat. We can talk a little.
Great.
Super.
Great, at the same time we can grab some food. And I brought you the result of my study on the carbon footprint from the eco-writer.
Ah, interesting.
First I'll explain a little bit about the process, and then I'll show you some numbers.
Stir it well. The chocolate is at the bottom. I will sit over here.
There, Pascal, the result of the carbon study that was done for me by the research center.
So is it done?
Yes, it's almost done. You see the whole objective of the study. The recorded emissions, the key numbers.
You see, what interests me a little is the transportation. It has always been a problem in the valley, you see.
It is true that the large issue is the transportation. Because if we look at the other emission areas, there, in energy, we're at 9%. And within it, there is even accommodation and ski lifts. So the activity actually releases very, very little pollution. Actually, transportation is very difficult to reduce, so to rectify this problem, I'm doing carbon offsetting at the moment. What I mean is that I'm helping reforest the Peruvian Amazon, and somewhere we arrive at carbon neutrality, in the geographical sense.
Does it ease your conscience to do this?
Of course, but in any case, it is a right to pollute.
Okay there.
Should not be a carbon disempowerment.
I agree with you. That is funny. I'm in town hall. It would be interesting if those that are elected see this. It's only that I have a lot of trouble at the community level, for example, to try to pass to the next level. Because I find that right now, it is not enough.
No, it's not enough.
The problem is that there is a history of costs.
That's it.
What is expensive?
The sustainable development must be attacked by something because the hat is large. In fact, water, air, biodiversity.
Pascal and Stéphane continue to rebuild the world late into the night. They face the uncertainty of the future by sharing information. The future of the valley depends on the tourism. It represents 95% of their economic activity. Yet, without snow, there is no skiing. Without skiing, there are no tourists. The snow is the raw material that is indispensable to the ski industry. With global warming, all the ski resorts' activities depend on snowmaking. Every night, it is worked and shaped by grooming machines.
Every night, we take our machine, and then, well,
We flatten the bumps. We bring the snow back up that the skiers brought down all day. And then, one of the largest jobs right now, since we have the snow guns, is to spread the snow around and to try to keep it as long as possible, because it costs a lot of money. We don't have room to make mistakes. We must be very careful. Compared to the 1980s, when I first started, we had snow for the majority of the winter. Now, only thanks to the snow guns, we can stay open all season long.
With the rising of temperatures, the resorts become more and more voracious with water consumption. And yet, the lack of snow produces less water, and more water is needed to make the artificial snow. 1/3 of the water available to the resort is designated solely for that purpose. It is the snowmakers that produce this white gold.
Approximately every 2 years we add the snow guns, and it rescues the season, that's for sure. We can say that today we ski on 80% artificial snow. And if we didn't have the snow machines, we would not be skiing. The resort would be closed.
The guns can only start making the snow once the temperature drops below zero. For the past 5 years, no chemical additives have been used, just cold air and water. This water mainly comes from the retention lakes under the glacier.
Fred for Gérard, do you hear me?
Yes?
Yes, just to warn you, the guns are going to start soon. We are missing quite a bit of snow. We will have to add to it.
Oh, okay.
See you later.
Then a strange phenomenon occurs. At night, the northern lights come out and light up the tracks under these unlikely latitudes. If water comes from the glaciers and rain falls, it is stored either in the groundwater or in dams. To meet the needs of the hydroelectric production, the massive French Alps have 120 dams and 300 water intakes located within the 6 regions of the French Alps. As such, EDF has become the guardian of the water in the mountain. Knowing the snow mass and anticipating the rainfall is therefore indispensable in order to better manage this precious resource. Over the past few years, EDF has developed a highly sophisticated device, the snow gauge of cosmic radiation. Currently, France employs 37 of these devices. One of them is situated on the massive Belladone at 2,300 meters above sea level. It allows them to measure the amount of snow all season long. The regular coring operations allow the EDF to know the quantity of water available in the blanket of snow, a vital piece of information needed to anticipate weather conditions.
So the purpose of our mission is to come and calibrate our online measuring tool. So there, around the TV snow gauge, we do 5 readings. And then we take the average of the 5 to find the mean density of snow. That gives us the value for the average water on the site.
The data transmitted by the snow gauge is then analyzed by the Weather Forecast Center at EDF, located in Grenoble. Within the parameters taken on site, EDF can adjust its water release.
I've found that in the past 20 years, we've had many more hot years, in particular in spring, with a sudden melting that arrived earlier. And if the snow melts 1 month earlier, and if we're in a particularly dry year, our colleagues at the hydroelectrical plant know not to empty their dams, and to have the time to refill them at the right season, to have the water reserves needed for the summer.
After 40 days without precipitation, the snow finally arrives. The snow is in such high demand, But will it be enough to calm the nerves of the villagers and to delight the vacationers? The artificial snow would have lasted only a few days. This year, the tourists have left the resorts a little prematurely, leaving behind a bitter feeling as if the spring has swallowed the winter. If global warming continues to undermine the seasons, the rebirth of the flora and fauna will be less magical, but moments of grace will persist. Like every year, during the first week of June, Pascal begins his long pastoral climb to join his goats at the Aiguille du Midi. Almost 1,000 meters of altitude on foot, he leaves the valley and enters what he has always considered a heaven. But this year, for the first time, Pascal is alone. His goats have remained at the farm. Today, the reason for the expedition is to verify the quantity of water available at this altitude.
Damn, there is nothing. It is the first time in all these years that this stream is dry. Now we will be delayed by almost a month. There is still nothing. Damn.
All hope is not yet abandoned. The water from the melted snow is absent. But the water from the rains, like every year, during the first week of June, Pascal begins his long pastoral climb to join his goats at the Aiguille du Midi. Almost 1,000 meters of altitude on foot, he leaves the valley and enters what he has always considered a heaven. But this year, for the first time, Pascal is alone. His goats have remained at the farm. Today, the reason for the expedition is to verify the quantity of water available at this altitude.
Damn, there is nothing. It is the first time in all these years that this stream is dry. Now we will be delayed by almost a month. There is still nothing. Damn.
All hope is not yet abandoned. The water from the melted snow is absent. But the water from the rains, retained in the rocks, is still considered a water reserve in the mountains. Perhaps there will be enough for Pascal's goats. Or will it totally evaporate with the heat?
Alors...
There is only a little water in the mouth of the pipe. Therefore, it means that the reserve is empty. There is no water. No water in the reserve means that there will be none for the goats this summer. It is now, at this time, there is no point in hoping. There is a deficit of water. I need to find another solution. For this year, it's over. He will have to remain below.
To produce his milk, the herd consumes about 500 liters of water per day. This drought leaves everything in doubt. It is time for Pascal to try to find a solution. To abandon his farm will lead to huge economic consequences, because mountain cheese will be more expensive.
If this situation continues, the solutions are a flexible canvas. A large, flexible canvas that we will fill, and it will hold a minimum of 20 cubic meters and will be filled with melted snow. It will eventually be the source because we are going to use all possible solutions, and the water intake, which will be a priority, will be the subglacier water that overlooks the pasture up there. But it is relatively high at 2,500 meters above sea level.
Beyond the economic, floristic, and personal interests, this mountain helps maintain the pastoral traditions in the Alps.
These pastures are part of the identity of the mountain, so I think that we should not allow ourselves to lose this type of activity. Because if we lose the know-how, we lose the way of life, we lose everything, and also the evidence. I am a witness to the lack of water even before the water is missed in the valley. Maybe. Oh, Floriane!
Oh, hello, Pascal.
Hello.
Oh, the flowers have all wilted. It's happened very quickly this year.
Floriane Messiaen works for the Center of Research on Altitude Ecosystem on a project called Phenoclim. This scientific and educational program is to measure the impact of global warming on alpine plant species.
So I come here every week to observe many species of trees. I see the spruce, but also I try to locate the larch as well, to see where they are in their spring growth. They are rather common trees and not particularly at risk. However, what will be interesting is to see how the vegetation that is around us every day will be able to deal with the changing of temperature. And as the temperature rises, as it's happening now, the earlier it will flower. But it's not something that will be able to shift indefinitely. We would like to know how they will adapt and survive, because perhaps they may not be able to grow at the same altitude. And the problem is that we do not have long-term data on the vegetation. Well, I'm going to see where they are, the outside resorts.
The CREA has sensors that continuously register the variations in temperature of the soil and air. The objective is to connect the seasonal developments of the flora with the climatic factors and to evaluate the real impact of global warming on the evolution of the biodiversity in the Alps.
Welcome to the front of the largest glacier in France, at the heart of the massive Mont Blanc.
In summer, Luc Moreau, the glaciologist, lectures around the Mont Blanc area. His knowledge of glaciers and his lectures on their evolution creates a passionate response in a number of tourists and scholars.
Here, on the carpet of sand and gravel, there is still 100 meters of pure ice, blue ice. Not so long ago, around 30 or 40 years, the glacier became thick because ice from the top melted and flowed, here, and it is said that the outcome was positive. At this moment, we have 10 meters of ice that melts and 7 meters of ice that forms. Therefore, every year, the glacier loses 3 meters of thickness. Yes, do you have a question?
When was the last positive year?
The last positive year. It was in the 90s. You see, that's 20 years ago. Over the past 20 years, the summers were hot. The thickness of the ice stays average in the winter, but the summers are so hot that the glaciers lose a lot.
The Chamonix villagers build service paths every year, several meters across, to allow climbers to reach the surface of the sea of ice. In 15 years, around 60 meters have been added to the rock. That is the equivalent of 20 floors. The priorities of the mountain are anticipating the impact of global warming and at the same time satisfying the growing demand of the tourism industry. For now, skiing remains the most lucrative entertainment, and few resorts are ready to abandon it. In this spirit, preparing the slope is important. We meet up again with Gerard, the person responsible for fixing the damage in the winter. In summer, he cuts the grass and does all the work to optimize the slope.
The more slopes we make, the more we save on artificial snow, on cultured snow. That is for sure, because the slopes are like lawns. Cold penetrates it, and then, as we don't have their big tough stems, with 15 to 20 centimeters in thickness of artificial snow at the beginning of the season, we can open. It is a big preparation of the slope, of course, but we save on water.
To save water is one thing, but to use the electric lawnmower is certainly another advancement for the environment. The future of resorts depends on their capacity to adapt to the new climate. It is the objective of the Territorial Climate Plan, which unites 4 communities in the Chamonix Valley. Their collective initiative is twofold: to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by the year 2020, and to allow the local population to have more say in the future of their region.
Global warming, it is an element that should alert us, or we should be very aware, and we should forecast it for the future. But it is fundamentally also an opportunity to anticipate and to organize the rapport of man with his environment, so that tomorrow we can continue to live, continue to develop an economy that corresponds to what people want in the area and would allow the people in the villages to live.
Part of the initiative is to examine all the water resources in the valley. With this in mind, local authorities work in collaboration with EDF, the main manager of the mountain's water stock. Responding to the different needs while coping with drought is one of the company's largest challenges. This year, because of the drought, the dams of Teen filled up to only 70% of their normal flow. This low level causes major concerns.
So, since January, a few of us have gathered to regularly check on the state of the water resources in order to optimize its use. Several needs were expressed. One part for hydroelectric production, another part to diversify the water users, and the cooling of nuclear power plants or thermal power stations. And to handle the peak consumption in the future, we use the reserve in the dam and also use nuclear or thermal energy.
Not far from here, in the neighboring valley, Mr. Payol's goats have gone out. This year, they will linger on their pasture, like the famous Blanquette of Mr. Seguin. They should make do with this meadow, land that Pascal has rented from the Auch community. Situated below an avalanche corridor and therefore declared unbuildable, this land remains the only solution. However, it is a plan B, because similar to the disappearing water reserves in the French Alps, land has become a coveted commodity.
This immense land, that is almost 2 hectares, is my only solution, as I am not climbing up this year to the pasture. We will have a chance in certain areas in France where the grass is a little greener and the diversity of the flora is more interesting than on the pasture. That is why it brings more. People think that Alpine cheeses are always better. Well, if my faith is wrong, at least they'll eat.
All these uncertainties do not prevent Pascal from pampering his goats. It is certainly a good way for him to remain optimistic for the future.
The weather changes every day. It has always been and always will be, whether it's natural or not. Now, I believe that man can adapt and deal with the problems, and today the fact that we lack water will force us to choose a little different path and to be in perfect harmony with the natural environment.
About 200 million years ago, Africa collided with Europe.